This afternoon's town board work session. We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance, if you'd please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we've got a couple items on the work session. First is a presentation from the Board of Ethics annual report from Chairman Mark Carney. If you please come forward. I'd like to thank you for being here today and for taking the time to go through this.
So, after several meetings with Chairman or Councilman Zuccalla, we do recommend some changes. First and foremost is that when you send these packets out, you should include a list of all your vendors that you've done business with the year before, because you're asking people to certify that no one in their immediate family has ever does business or has contact with them. But as I would assume, the town of Amherst does business with hundreds of different vendors, so it would be impossible for someone to make that statement if they don't know who you're doing business with.
Sure.
The second change would be that we want something on there acknowledging that employee has either read the Code of Ethics or you present them with a copy of that section with your Code of Ethics. Again, it reminds people what they're supposed to be certifying. There was another change when we moved one of the questions to a different position, because if you frankly say no, then the rest of the questions really don't matter. You still have to list your businesses. That's a matter of public knowledge. But if you're telling this board or this council that you don't have the conflict, we've given you all the vendors, then you're fine.
Okay.
Those are really the only things.
Well, we appreciate that. Are there any questions from this board?
Not a question, but we did work up a draft possible future form, and it is included with the report, and it's something that we can review later.
And then after we review it and give feedback, it has to get put into the town code.
Okay.
It has to be, all we can do is recommend. Obviously,
Right.
you control your ethical section.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, next up is a discussion of the St. Mary's Appeal, Historic Preservation Commission, Chairman Brian Swartz.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. Again, my name is Brian Swartz. I'm chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. And I actually wanted to go over 3 different items today. The first being the St. Mary's decision and appeal and the process that went with that decision. So in there were, sorry, a little close. In there were a couple things that we wanted to refute, and I understand that they were not entered in the public record, but we would like assurances that that indeed did not happen. The first thing that the applicant, thank you, said was that we violated open meetings law, and they absolutely had no proof of that. So that's a big sticking point for us. We did go into executive session, like I said, at the public hearing, but we only discussed process. We made no deliberations. So that's something I really wanted to stress in this working session, and I actually wasn't sure how this working session would go with everyone here in the audience, but anyway, I'm hoping there's a little back and forth here. The other thing I wanted to say was this property received the scrutiny and the time that it did, and I know that it was mentioned. A few of the audience members that came up to speak that night referenced the amount of time. We are only in control of certificates of appropriateness in a certain time frame. So the fact is, from when that first one came to us to the time we made a decision was because the applicant kept changing things in the application. or there were back and forth. So again, it should be really noted that the HPC did not hold up the project for, I don't know how long how long we received. I think January 2023 was the first, or February of 2023 was the first time that we were notified that the applicant was performing work without a permit. Again, that's something I want to bring up here too, is that a property owner in the town of Amherst was allowed to do work without a permit, and then in the end, they ended up getting what they wanted. We're here to try to mitigate things like that. The reason that this property received such scrutiny from our board was because of its historic status, not only locally, but state and national as well. So it was a big deal to us to give it this kind of scrutiny and time. And I know that multiple members spent lots of time researching, conducting site visits, looking at products. Our expertise was put into play with this one. The next thing I want to say is that our board it can only operate in the statute, and I brought the statute with us. It can only operate within what our statute lays out. So if there's other factors that your board has control over, whether it be a pilot program, a future property sale, a future rental increase, or something like that, we cannot make judgments based on those inferences or conjectures. I know that night it was brought up in the public hearing that may be the case. We only have jurisdiction over what's presented to us. So I wanted to make that like really plainly clear, that I realize that there was maybe, and I don't even know if there's a threat to increase in rent at that property, but we're not able to use that in our judgment-making process. So that's pretty much all I have for St. Mary's. I don't know. I have backup with me in case anyone else wanted to add anything to that.
Well, maybe the fact that there was no justification given for the board's decision. I think that is something that many members of the Historic Preservation Commission are struggling with, because such time and effort was taken by volunteers who are experts in their field according to the state mandate for the creation of the Historic Preservation Commission. So there being no discussion as to why the decision was made to void the HPC's decision, that's an issue with several of the HPC members at this point.
So I'll just say that typically this board votes up and down on resolutions. So in terms of the resolution structure was provided by the planning board or planning department, in this case, that is somewhere where this board and HPC differ in terms of, right, if it's in front of us, it's usually an up and down vote. And it's just on the resolution as laid out or prepared on paper, and it's devoid of a lot of commentary. Once in a while, we'll comment if there's a change or a real sticking issue, but most of the time, the commentary is limited. So that's one of those scenarios where, unlike a planning board or a zoning board, we don't go through a full the resolution's presented and then it's up or down on the resolution. And I think that may be some of the confusion that's happening between this board. And I'm an abstention on that, but obviously the issue and the reason why HPC's here, I assume, is because of a confidence issue in this board overturning decisions moving forward, right? I would guess that's probably at the core of the question at hand.
Yeah, so that's my other kind of, it gets into my other two things is that we're an all volunteer board that the town board elected to put on our board. all the people on it have some sort of area of expertise as laid out in our statute. So yeah, we want, one of my things, and that's actually the third thing I was going to go over, is collaboration with other boards. So, you know, we don't have a seat at planning or zoning board, not saying we have to, but collaboration is something we learned about at our preservation day. In our speaker panel, or our HPC panel at the end of the day, we found that other municipalities meet concurrently, or they have someone at that board when issues come up, when historic preservation issues come up. So things are a bit more streamlined. I think we're in the dark or not sure of some of the other processes that happen with these other boards. So to be there, to have a seat, to see the agendas, I think would be a good step, possibly.
Talking about zoning and planning specifically.
I think so. Yeah. That's what the other, yeah.
They're all online. You can review them at any time, and planning puts up all the projects. But many of the things that you guys discussed don't even go to planning or zoning. They go to building for permits.
Yeah, so I think there's I mean, we could certainly have somebody present from any of the boards at another board meeting, and it's not an issue. Planning board here is really, I would say, mired in site plan approvals, and it's not so much an architectural oversight. And we do have a design advisory board that is involved in some of the districts, and that design advisory board meets depending on the project. It's a little less regular than the ZBA and the planning board, but you know, if there was a desire to be participatory or to have overlap, I think that's you know, we can figure that out. I think the real dilemma we get into is the scale and scope of the community, right? So
Sure.
it's not Hamburg, you know, it's not East Aurora, it's not Orchard Park. It's 130,000 person town, 54 square miles, and planning board meetings that stretch from 7 p.m. till midnight. So, you know, there's something to keep in mind is quantity. I think so I don't know that you have to worry about planning board or ZBA specifically creating an overlap. I guess my question is for you, or for the board, is what the input from the planning department is, or how you feel that because the planning department here really needs to serve as a bridge between what's happening in the realm of those boards and your board. So I know that the planning department typically meets regularly with the planning board's chairperson.
Did they have a working session?
They do have a work session before their board meetings. I don't know that they have any other. Dan, do you?
Can I ask Dan to come up and talk about the process? Because his office runs your board as well. So I know that the referrals are made to your board through the planning department. So let Dan talk about it.
So, a couple things. We do have a person in our office designated as a liaison to the HPC, and hope to provide a professional level of support for the board on different issues. We are in no way, shape, or form have the expertise that the HPC members have. So I make that really clear. Like, myself or the person I have designated for that role is not a historic preservation expert. So we do the best we can to provide certainly procedural and some quasi-legal advice to the board, or the commission rather, as they go along. The other thing I would mention is, you know, we had a situation about a year or so ago with the building in Snyder where there was some historic preservation issues related to the site plan that had been proposed. We did refer that project back to the HPC for some guidance on some issues related to that, be it designation or further preservation. So my own feeling is if there's a situation that warrants crossover, we certainly would take advantage of the fact that the boards can collaborate on that, or if not collaborate, certainly counsel one another on what's going on or seek some expertise from them. Just to the point that was made earlier, a lot of this stuff does get referred to the building department because they are building issues in a lot of cases. So there's a lot of crossover. If there's some additional support that's required, I think it's probably worthwhile sitting down and discussing that, try to figure out what that would look like.
I think one of the dilemmas you run into, that we should think about moving forward, is, when it comes to our zoning, say mixed-use zone, or traditional infill, right, which is new build, but infilling in historic districts, we regulate building materials to some degree.
Yep.
And, we have there's a sort of a, hey, here's what your expectations are prior to the onset of a project, right? But we don't necessarily have the same rules in place or regulation in place for historic properties. So had this board previously or prior to this scenario had a regulation saying that historic properties of this nature cannot substitute slate roofs, right? Then there wouldn't have been any question coming in. It would have been regulatory in its nature. But we don't have in place design standards for dealing with historic
We do not.
the historic elements.
Outside of those for which the HPC has purview, the planning board does not have that kind of guidance.
But we could, and
Could,
and that would
suppose.
be in turn a regulation that would make everything pretty predictable in terms of material substitutions or selections.
I think whatever we do has to be as clear and as succinct as possible. And I know, for example, we have our design guidelines that the Design Advisory Board uses in the mixed-use districts. But to your point, it doesn't typically deal with the historic element of those decisions. So there might be some opportunity for that.
I just think that there are some things like you can't replace, you wouldn't be able to replace a wood cornice with FIPON, or you wouldn't, which is a foam, right?
So
Or you
we,
wouldn't be able to replace slate for whatever, or brick for synthetic.
so
Or
if
I
some,
want to
I mean,
express a concern about this discussion. I don't think it's appropriate for us to do now, and I also want to think about the residents of Eggertsville and Snyder, the people who own homes and may have lived there for 40 years and can't afford to replace their slate roof or do things the same to the standards you've been talking about. So I don't want to see a blanket set of rules, because we keep talking about making the town affordable so people can live there, but there's hundreds of houses on the blue list where people have lived there for 50 years and could not afford to replace the slate roof with a slate roof.
Well, your problem might be the list itself, right, and not necessarily in how you treat the list. You could put standards in place for landmarks and landmark only, but I think there are probably properties out there where we wouldn't want to see substitution. Now, you could get too carried away with that to some degree, right? But I think that there's an obvious opportunity that would set the groundwork for commercial buildings and that nature to live by a set of standards. Like for instance, replacement of a wood window with vinyl, or replacement of a wood window with aluminum in a commercial property? You know, is that something that, if the property's historically designated, is that something that we'd be willing to set a standard for? And if we did, then, you know, then that makes HPC in the work of other boards and review of that process a lot easier, a lot more predictable. But
I'd say a couple things. So there's over, I think, 1,300 properties in the town of Amherst that are eligible to be landmarked. That's determined by the state and by our reconnaissance surveys. The second thing is, I think it's a misconception to say that if a window's in bad condition, it automatically needs to be replaced. We just had a really great success story with the Stim House, which is a locally landmarked property. If the owner requested to replace the windows, we were able to work with them and repair their existing historic windows, which are still intact and in good condition. So I don't want to say, like, we don't want to put that hex on people. It's how it's perceived, and that's not the case at all. We want to preserve the quality of the built environment in this town. I think that is what we are interested in doing. That's what I'm interested in doing. Can I make a
I
statement?
understand what you're talking about, but I also know people who couldn't afford to meet the standards and therefore had to move out of their homes because they couldn't maintain it up to the standards of HPC.
In the town of Amherst, that's happened?
Yes.
I mean, we only have like, 19 landmark buildings that are before.
Well, there are people. I'm talking people who've told me this has happened to them. But the other thing is, I know people in other places, individuals who live in other cities, and I just think that this is not the place to have that discussion. I think your group should come with recommendations to the board, but I have real personal concerns about it. It's one thing for a historic landmark, it's another thing for other buildings.
Yeah, and I would
With all
say,
due respect,
go ahead.
I don't believe right now, Brian, you're seeking that. This is part of the grant that we applied to, right, to get more design standard guidance, to make further recommendations at a point where we would have an additional conversation. That's not your conversation today.
Do we want to give an update on that tomorrow at our meeting?
we,
Right, yeah, I don't think that, right. I don't
Right,
think
right.
we're there, right, yeah. Right.
I wasn't, Kate, I was not accusing you of anything.
But back to the point of what I think you were trying to make here is, and we've discussed this previously, I wasn't here when everything started with Chateau and everything, but one of the frustrations I got from fellow commission members was not being brought in until after site plans had already gone to the planning board. And so perhaps if there was
exactly
something
right.
that
Yeah.
you could be notified of a blue-rated property before it got to that
Yeah,
part. and
that's
create
where I think
that.
our expertise could be useful when you're discussing potential upcoming projects that head to those boards. I mean, I'm not saying we have to be at every meeting,
in that area.
but there's certain things, adjacencies, certain things with seeker that trigger either state review or our review that I feel like we could try to streamline or collaborate on and actually would make a better project.
so we got a couple other comments.
Yeah.
Hi. So let me just start by thanking you for coming here today, because I think it's important to have a discussion like you asked about at the podium. And that's important, because I want to hear your perspective as just like we wanted to hear the applicant's perspective.
Sure.
So thank you to you and the HPC members who also joined you. I don't think for a second the HPC violated any open meeting law.
They didn't.
I don't think for a second your other point to, you have to stay within the statute given to you. And your second one was to, I don't think you violated any of the things that you brought up here that they accused you of. So I don't want you to know that I would make my decision believing those accusations. But you are here today asking for justification, which I think is fair. We, as the supervisor said, we vote up or down, and I will be happy to tell you my justification, because the HPC is composed of volunteers who dedicate their time and their expertise to this community, and when I make a decision going against them, it's only fair that I provide that explanation. So the cost of the roof was my main factor. And the people who live in that part of our community, I did not want the cost of a real slate roof to elevate the rent or the cost of living to the people who live there. So I took that into consideration, and by your own admission, you're handcuffed to the statutes in front of you by HPC. at the town level, I try to take those considerations, the economical considerations to our community and the residents who live there. So that's why I made the decision I did against the HPC. I don't want you to think that it's in my 6 years being here, I think it's the only one I've ever done against HPC. But that's my justification, that's why I did it. So I just want you to know that, and that I do appreciate all the work you guys do, and I hope that you continue serving. You're doing a great job for this community, and I look forward to your future as a whole.
Okay. No, yeah, thank you for that explanation. That signals to me that I need to do a better job of communicating what was our determination and our decision-making. I'm not sure that cost was ever brought up. And actually, just to note, the winning bid that got accepted, we're never going to know the actual contracted price that they end up paying for this. I will say this for the applicant, they did go out, they did design for a slate roof, they did get pricing on a slate roof. That's a great thing. I'm really glad they did that. And they did share us the bid numbers that they received for all the types of roofs that they designed for. And based on our expertise, we feel that the bid that they accepted, they're going to be receiving a lot of change orders. The cost is going to be highly escalated from but who's to know? We don't get to see those documents. So again, this is a bit of a lesson learned for me as well. So thank you for that.
So
Go ahead.
I don't like to cut off conversation. We do have an executive session to deal with because we're frankly appointing an interim attorney tonight. So I think we should probably figure out how to follow up on this. I think it would be appropriate to pick an HPC meeting work session next for board members who have an interest.
Okay.
And have our board attend your meeting and possibly participate in a work session to discuss. Obviously, there's an issue anytime an appointed board has concerns over an elected body's acceptance of an appeal. There should be. That would be the same as what I would expect from our planning board if we voted opposite their recommendation, or if we voted to appeal in an appellate manner with zoning board. So I think that merits conversation about how to avoid those types of interactions moving forward. I will note that the nature of the historic preservation and appeals process is probably something that we really need to have better counsel on, and that ultimately, as we move forward with selection of now a new town attorney, that we really need to keep in mind is that we try to find somebody who may be able to better help with dealing with the integration and interplay between boards.
Okay.
So I'll let the councilwoman who's your liaison, Councilwoman Marinucci, work to set up an opportunity for this board to participate.
And she's been to every meeting too, and I thank her for that as well. And I also want to give props to James Quinn. He is our liaison with the planning department. He does an excellent job. So I'd like to give him credit for all the work that he does as well.
Okay.
I just would like to add really quickly, we did have a town attorney representative with us in the exec session to ensure that there was no negotiation during that. I know that we discussed it, but I just want to make very, very clear there was no violation of open meetings. And secondarily, we did include the timeline in the second meeting agenda because I think it is very, whether it was clear to residents or not, it is very obvious to me that it was continued different applications and not appeals back to us. The date then which we heard it at the town board was specifically requested by the applicant. We could have heard it at an earlier time if they had wanted to. So some of that delay, which unfairly gets put on the HPC, and even the town board isn't in line with the facts, and I understand that, but I do know that the meeting that I attended, only the last one that before it came to HPC, there was a huge packet that had been delivered, I think, the day or the day before, and the commission members had read it and were prepared. And so I know there was a lot of work late into the evenings to be prepared for that and during that day. So I appreciate the service and the time and everything that went into that. But those are the 2 points that I wanted to make clear. I believe one of your points got lost. I don't know if you had something quickly to wrap up here, because I think you did 1 and 3. I don't know if you did your
Oh,
second.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Just quickly, I'm sorry.
No, actually, my number 2 point was to go through our process and how we make our decisions, but that I think would be better for a work session amongst the board members. Okay,
When's your next meeting?
we meet tomorrow. We have minimal agenda, but I'm sure we could, just have this, add it to as a discussion later in our agenda tomorrow.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda this afternoon is our town board meeting items. We have multiple public hearings tonight. The first is on the 2024 water line replacement project, a bond resolution in the amount of $700,000. Brian, you're doing that? Okay. The second is the lighting district extension miscellaneous parcels. I don't know how many people are going to come here tonight, but I know that the engineering department's been fielding plenty of questions regarding this. Just a reminder, this is properties that have been identified that have been in the lighting district. We're not currently taxed in the lighting district. And so I would expect we'll hear some questions about certain parcels. Attorney's office is handling that? Is that?
Yes. I just want to point out that it's historical that they haven't been taxed. This is not
I get it.
something recent. They may not have paid taxes for 50 years on these lights,
Right.
or however long they've lived in their homes.
So we'll see how this one goes. Resolution 674, 3880 and 3910 East Robinson Road rezoning. Whose is that? That's Sean? That yours? Okay. And then we have development review actions. Resolution 210 is 46, 54, 60, 68, 74, and 84 South Linden.
We're not doing it
Yeah, I was gonna say,
tonight.
we're not voting on that this
No,
evening.
that's
Adjourned.
been pulled, withdrawn.
Do residents know that?
I don't think they do. I think it'd be better if you just set it at a date to be determined, so that when we do have a decision to be made, we can alert.
But how do we know that? If our hope as a board is that this thing is redesigned or revamped in conjunction with the idea of the lamppost as a property, then shouldn't we just really withdraw it and send it back to the drawing board? Otherwise, why not just vote? Anybody on this board have a?
Is there
if
any
we're just
reason
gonna-
that they couldn't reapply if we vote down a
No,
bicentennial
they
comp plan?
just change it. And
I-
it's not voting it down, it's just withdrawing it.
But I'm ready to vote on it.
Oh. Yeah, we want to adjourn it.
Let's see, like, the petitioner is well aware if you're looking for changes to it. I don't think they come up with those.
I just feel bad because residents come in here expecting a vote and then they don't get one. So, I mean, I'm thinking that if we adjourn it, I might set it all the way out to like November or October.
We can revisit that. We'll talk to the petitioner and let them know that you want some kind of definitive notion.
Yeah, I mean, I really think at that point you go out past budget. November 18th?
If we adjourn it for them to submit something different, wouldn't we have to reopen another public hearing?
No.
No.
But the residents who have been coming
They
up,
present it as a new project.
Well, so it's a, yeah. 12. So it's a comprehensive plan amendment, it's not an actual, right? So it's, because it's not the rezoning, I think what we're asking is for them to tweak how they would approach this in a comprehensive plan. So that probably has to do with density and articulation of how they would treat public space, in this case, the lamp post.
You're actually right, Brian. This is a land use decision, and what happens is we all get fixed on concept plan. So at this point, questions of density, context, those are the things we consider.
And we really can't think too much about the lamppost because as far as they're concerned, it's not going anywhere for quite a while.
No, but it should address
The reality
it.
is, we need to think about what we would want it to be.
But if you took the lamp post property and then threw somebody's garage backing up to it, it probably lessens the impact of that property, right? I mean,
There's a bigger question there, the land post, and those kinds of places, which I think we do need to address at some point.
right.
In this case, I think there are some changes that can be made to the site concept plan, and they just haven't come up with those yet.
I agree. I'm like I said, I'm willing to throw it into November.
Just for my own clarity here, they're seeking a comp plan amendment to go from single-family to mixed residential. Like, they would have to then come before us again for a rezoning for whatever the site plan looks like at that point. So the decision on single-family versus mixed residential, once we comp plan amend to mixed residential, they could come at us with a rezoning request for all sorts of different zoning within mixed residential, correct?
Generally fall within edge housing.
So the question before us now is if it should be single-family or mixed residential, because any ultimate designing,
So I disagree, because I think traditionally in a comprehensive plan, when you have a large, it's private property, but it's almost got a quasi-public function to it because the lamp post is a community asset. I think that a comprehensive plan can address the manner in which new development addresses that property. I think that that's a typical, we would ask the same thing if something were built along, a golf course, or if something were built along a town park, or if something were built along, near a YMCA, or if something was built near a school, whether it's a private school or a public school. We would ask in a comprehensive plan that new property development adjacent to that parcel, address that parcel in a meaningful manner. And I think that from my perspective, that's what the submission's missing at this point.
Yeah.
Is a meaningful address of the community-based organization next to it.
And just as a reminder, we sold them the paper street over there.
We did,
sold
although
them, I'm just pointing that out.
We sold the paper street under a different context, right?
Yes.
Different anticipation, so.
Yes,
but
I'm
it is
just pointing.
single-family zone, correct, right now? So they could take out this amendment and go forward with single-family zoning without any sort of,
They could.
so this amendment in front of us is whether we want mixed I know they say MFR 5 is what they potentially will seek. They could seek 4, right? They could see, so I know I said it last meeting, this bicentennial comp plan amendment has been before us, at least before me, since I started in January, and we're going to keep continuing this when we have to then again do it again as a rezoning if we do approve the comp plan amendment. So I don't know what we're looking for them to amend at this point, if they're only seeking mixed residential under the bicentennial comp plan and then have to come to us with this rezoning anyways.
And so again, this as a comp plan amendment, we ask you to look at the general land use pattern and the context of the area, not focusing on a specific site plan or a specific element to it. Look at the broad area, see what the nature of development there is, think about what you foresee or what the plan projects for that area, and decide whether what they're proposing is consistent with that or not. We want to keep the zoning question separate because it gets into the specifics, right? Probably too far into the specifics because that's going to be dealt with at a site plan or in some cases a subdivision level. So this is largely contextual.
Of mixed residential versus single family. Are we
For that-
okay with
for-
mixed residential for this
For
parcel?
that area,
And the paper
yes.
street there.
Yeah, and I will add this. I've had informal conversations with several folks associated with the veteran service organizations that we have in town. I think there is an opening there to have a discussion amongst them as to what they want to do, because we're going to face this situation with the jurid posts. We're not going to face it, the village is going to face it with the 416 posts across the street. AmVet's 49 on Sheridan Drive. There's a lot of places like this that there may be some opportunities there. And as everybody knows, we're going to probably really jump into it when it comes to the Catholic churches that we see closing and some of the other religious properties, so.
Okay, so that said, what does the board want to do with this?
I move to adjourn.
We're not moving anything, but
Well, I want to adjourn it to November.
Angela,
I want to vote.
okay, Sean?
I want some more time to explore the piece that the commissioner talked about with regards to the lampposts, so I'm more in November.
Okay, Mike? Okay, all right, resolution 675 is, we're not doing this with any consent agenda, so I'm just asking what direction we're heading. Resolution 675 is on a commitment to accept the future public improvements, 4300 Millersport Highway, SP-2022-03A. I haven't heard from everybody, but the biggest comments I heard early on from board members over the past couple of weeks have been, you know, that they would like there to be a preservation of design approval by the town if the town's going to end up owning the road. To that end, I mean, it's sort of constituted in the ultimate acceptance of the road, but they would like that to be spelled out. I have no issues with that. I think the reality of the property is the design of the road, if it's going to become public infrastructure, should be designed to town standards as though the town were designing it for ourselves. Are there any questions about this resolution?
I believe it's been designed to those standards.
I don't know that, and I don't know that anybody on this board fully knows those
I
standards. So
know that from being at planning board
I
meetings.
don't have any reason why we couldn't articulate that sentiment, though, as part of this decision. It either matches or it doesn't, but, you know, I think it's acceptable for this town board to acknowledge that we don't know what those standards are, or what the design criteria of
We
a
can't
engineering
accept-
department is.
We can't accept something as a public road unless it meets our public road standards. Isn't that correct?
Right, so I think. Right, so I'm just saying, I think that having that caveat to it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, so that means we're saving it till later?
Well, we have to anyways. We don't do development review actions
that's
under
true.
consent agenda. All right, under consent agenda, resolution 676, the Albright Knox art installation and maintenance of sculpture at Bassett Park, CRS 5005. The installation has been there for a while. Is there any issues with the installation or the maintenance of the sculpture request? If not, is there any reason not to include it in a consent agenda? Okay. Resolution 677 is a vendor name change and contract extension for DXO Communications of Buffalo to RDT Mail Corp. CRS 4995. A reason not to accept that vendor name change or contract extension via consent. Resolution 678 is an authorization for prepayment and insert in tax bill mailing for the RDT Mail Corp. CRS 4995 and 504. Any questions regarding that resolution? Any reason not to include it in a consent agenda? Resolution 679 is the purchase of office furniture from Eaton Office Supplies, CRS 4961. Any questions regarding that purchase? Any reason not to include it in the consent agenda? Resolution 680 is a senior center kitchen exhauster cleaning, CRS 503. Any reason not to include the exhauster cleaning in consent? Resolution 681 is the town hall reconstruction of the main entrance stairs. Any question regarding the resolution or the reconstruction? Any reason not to include it in consent? Resolution 682 is a budget transfer and amendments. Any questions regarding those? Any reason to withhold them from consent? Resolution 683 is extension of the townwide copier maintenance contract, CRS 4989. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason to lose it any reason to lose it from consent? Any reason not to include it in consent? Resolution 684 is industrial and commercial supplies equipment, NYS OGS Award 23262, CRS 4994. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason not to include it in consent? Resolution 685 is an award of bid 2024030 for adulticides and pesticides, CRS 4997, 4999, 5000, 5001, 5002. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason not to include that in consent? Resolution 686 is to authorize a contract for Munis time and attendance module, CRS 4987. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 687 is establishing a school speed zone on Westfield Road. Any questions regarding that establishment of speed zone?
I have a question.
Sure.
Will this be a year-round? It doesn't say only while school's in session, but Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I wasn't sure if they do summer.
They're only enforceable while school's in session.
Okay, thank you.
Questions, any other further questions on the resolution? Any reason not to include it in consent? Resolution 688 is contract extension for Valley Tire Company, CRS 5009. Any questions regarding the contract extension? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 689, I keep inverting everything. It's a public safety dispatcher for police department. Any questions regarding the appointment? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 690 is a senior maintenance worker, buildings maintenance facilities. Any questions regarding the senior maintenance worker? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 691 is emergency services and safety coordinator for emergency services. Any questions regarding the appointment? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 692 is to authorize supervisor to execute an agreement with the Harrison Studio for the provision of underwriting services, CRS 5007. Any questions regarding that resolution? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 693 is the purchase of a drone and software designation of sole source vendor Skydio Incorporated, CRS 4988. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 694 is a sheltering agreement for transit, CRS 4984. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 695 is a sheltering agreement for Mill, CRS 4983. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Resolution 696 is a sheltering agreement for Casey, CRS 4985. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason to withhold it from consent? And Resolution 697 is a management agreement, CRS 5008. Any questions regarding the resolution? Any reason to withhold it from consent? Communication 67 is correspondence from Sean Hopkins Esquire and proposed project for 4300 Millersport Highway. I'm just going to recommend we receive this, refer to the planning department. Any reason not to do that via consent? Resolution 686, 68. Ugh. Correspondence from Sean Hopkins Esquire, proposed project at 4300 Millersport. I would recommend we receive this and refer it to the town planning department as well. Any reason not to do that via consent? Communication 69 is correspondence from Roger Sullivan, proposed Mission Barbecue Restaurant.
We need to refer this to engineering and planning.
Building as well? No? Yeah, I was gonna say, so we'll refer to engineering, planning, and the building department. Any reason not to do that via consent? Communication 70 is a notice of claim for Wayne Sellers versus Town of Amherst et al. Recommend we receive this, refer to the town attorney. Any reason not to do that via consent? Communication 71 is a summons and complaint for Celine Finance Incorporate LP, Celine Finance LP versus Town of Amherst et al. Recommend we receive this, refer to the town attorney. Any reason not to do that via consent? Communication 72 is a notice of petition to review tax assessments. I assume we're just referring this to the town attorney. Is there some other action on it? No. Okay. Recommend we refer to the town. What?
There were two suspensions.
Okay, hold on. Any reason not to do that via consent? Okay, 2 suspension items this afternoon.
One to appoint an interim town attorney, and the other one to have the supervisor sign a contract with NOCO for an extension of 3 months for diesel fuel.
All right, that said, we do have an executive session to adjourn to this afternoon. We have 2 topics. The first is listed here, bargaining unit contract negotiations update. The second is the town attorney position, also subject to a suspension item this evening. I'm going to motion to adjourn to executive session at this time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sam and